God help us, here we go. 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 All right. G'day, ladies and gents, and welcome to Unprofessional podcast number 6, or at least I think it's number 6. I actually kind of lost count. Today we are joined by Crash Laobi once again. He's decided to come back so we can tell him to go fuck himself. And we are going to be going through some of the recent happenings in DCS, X-Plane 11, the new Vulkan beta, and Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, in particular, the recent multiplayer video that they released. It had some really, really interesting shit to discuss in there.
Just to be
So,
clear, that was
first,
the Vulkan beta for X-Plane 11.
yes, Vulkan beta for X-Plane 11.
Yep.
Yes, we are joined by Deadmeat as per normal, and as I said, Crash, welcome to the podcast once again.
Thank you very much, Mags. An absolute pleasure to be back, and hello to everybody listening.
All right. So, first things I just really want to cover on this end. I know Deadmeat will go through some of the IL2 sales that are coming up, but I just want to do a quick reminder on the DCS All in This Together promotion. That's actually running at the moment for those who are unaware of this, although I don't know how you've missed it at this point in time. Essentially, once every couple of days, a new aircraft is coming up for a free flight for DCS. Being as we are in the 6th at the moment, or we're about to leave the 6th here. It's the 6th the rest of the world. It's the last day for the Focke-Wulf 190 A8. I actually probably should have taken an opportunity to fly that one myself because I don't actually own that one. Next up is the BF109K4, which will be available on the 7th to the 8th. The 9th and the 10th is the Persian Gulf map, and the 10th is Nevada. F-86 Sabre, MiG-15, and the Ka-50 Black Shark is coming after that. It's definitely the time to have a look at DCS if you haven't already. As much as this sounds like a bit of an ad, the reason why I sort of wanted to list all that out is we were sort of discussing promotional things that DCS could do the last time you were on, Laobi, and I actually had one thought looking at all this all the way through. It's actually probably the only thing I can think of that would have improved this, because this is a pretty good promotion, but I reckon they should have made the maps, both of them, available at the same time and available for the entire length of the promotion, so everybody can fly all the planes on the maps themselves.
Absolutely, particularly as the maps are a much bigger download.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, just agreeing. Keep going.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, well, particularly with the download size of the maps, and additionally, you'd have people wanting to join certain servers and maybe test out, particularly with the World War II aircraft, they'll want to test out maybe Normandy. And I think, would have been a good idea to have all three maps. But I think it is pretty much, they're the only ones really doing an offer like this. And it is a pretty cool offer for people to get their feet wet, so to speak, in DCS.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping it's working really well for us. I'd like to see these pop up really regularly, at least once every couple of months. Rotate through all the aircraft so everyone can have a bit of a poke. Even throwing up some of the Flaming Cliffs aircraft, because there are some people that don't have access to those that would be interested in those particular aircraft, and just make one of the maps available for a more extended period of time to play around on, and hopefully generate some more interest through. But again, just wanted to make sure everybody was up to date on the fact that that is actually running, and take advantage of it while you can, because if there's any of the planes that are left on that lineup that you actually want to fly, or if you want to check out the maps themselves, they're coming up. They are a big download. You'll want to start the download the second they're available to access, because they will, depending on your connection, take upwards of a day to download. But you'll see why so many people actually fly on them. Persian Gulf in particular is definitely worth your time to have a look at.
Yep. And I'm sure everyone by this point knows exactly how I feel about the map situation on DCS. So I won't reiterate it, but I agree. They should have made those maps available from the start.
It's my opinion on that is it's actually a really, whoever organized this didn't quite think it through, I don't think, and they missed that part. The longer those maps are available for, the more time you have to play around on. and you're having to play around on aircraft that you don't potentially own, the more time you sort of have to become attached to them and enjoy the fact that they're there and discover things about them. If you've only got access to them for a day, or if you've got a particularly fast connection too, you're not going to have enough time to be able to really sink your teeth into those maps. So I think it's actually probably a marketing miss.
Yeah, just a little housekeeping there, Mags. Can I get you to notch your voice activation, like the triggering, down by a couple of dB, just to make sure we're catching all of your, that's little bits of cutting off of your words in some points.
That may not be the voice activation part at the moment. That may. I'm just checking on this end. Maybe my internet in general. Hang on a second. Hopefully that's not going to start messing up. I have had issues.
It's not too bad. It's just, some of your words are very, very clipped off at the ends.
Yeah, my apologies for that. Yeah, obviously with the what's the term they're using at the moment for it to get away past the YouTube algorithm? The COOF, I think it is the COOF. If you know what you mean, yeah, the COOF.
Human malware is the term I use.
Yeah, the human malware. Yeah, I like human. That's a good one. With that getting around at the moment, and the entire planet deciding to jump on the internet at the same time, yeah, my internet at this end has gone. It was shit normally. Now it's something special.
and not special in the you mean a lot to me kind of way, but especially in the riding the short bus, as the Americans will put it, way.
I made a comment about it on social media the other day about the net being particularly bad, and it's actually slowing the speed that I can upload videos. Like the my recent Resident Evil 4 or Resident Evil 2 video that I uploaded, that took 12 hours to get that bastard of a thing up. That's how bad it is. But to give you a better idea of how it is, the telecommunications minister for Australia, the guy who's in charge of our internet, isn't actually using our NBN at the moment because our NBN is too slow.
Christ on a back.
That's how bad it is at the moment. He came out that he's not actually using the NBN at home because he's NBN at home and he would have the best that is available, and he is in a prime area for the fastest connections, and it's not fast enough for his workload.
It's not fast enough for his fetish porn.
So that's about where we're at.
You'd hate. Hey, Crash, what did you tell me that your new internet connection performance is like again?
Well, considering basically there were people who had to walk 12 miles a day to a well, and I'm back every morning, and they had better internet than I had until last week. It's like last week I was getting six down and half a megabyte up. Hence,
sorry, just to clarify, is that megabyte or megabit?
Megabit.
Yes. So, yeah, 50k a second up and.
Oh, sorry, megabyte.
So 500.
500k up and 6,000k down. Hence, uploading a video was a serious commitment. So I upgraded their. Finally, a company came to my area that could actually do something decent. So now I'm on 150 down and 50 up, and that's actually they promise 500, but it's on speed tests I've done. I'm getting around 150 down and 50 up.
You're a horrible cunt. You know that?
Now I have no excuse not to upload videos, and I'm like, oh fuck.
Yeah, I have no other options in this area. I've been trying for 2 years to get my net upgraded here, and the last time I got given a number for my queue, and apparently I'm still in the queue to actually have that service. The problem is that phone call was 6 months ago.
Jesus.
And there's nothing else I can do at this point. And considering everything that's going on at the moment, I don't think there will be until it's all solved. And even then, it'll probably have to be on a national scheme. But we are getting off subject a little bit here.
Well, anyway, let's get into the IL2 stuff. So firstly, for those of you who have an IL2 account on the website, unfortunately it doesn't apply to the Steam users, but if you've linked your Steam account to the website, then it should apply. But if you log into the IL2 website, go to your profile and go to the promo codes tab, you should find a Cabin Fever 50 and Cabin Fever 75 promo code. Now that will give you 50% off on, 50% off some items and 75% off on other items. So very well worth looking at. You know, if you're missing any of the IL2 stuff, it's definitely well worth looking at.
Yeah, and definitely worth mentioning to everybody here too, because obviously we're home at this point in time. So if you're going to sit back and actually spend some time outside, why not do it in a virtual environment? Since we're starting to reach the point where we start getting fines for the front door. It's getting fucking stupid. What was it? I saw something the other day about them banning sunbathing in the UK or some shit is happening.
Yep.
The big question is, why are they sunbathing in the UK in the first place?
Okay, that is a really fair question.
Are they copying some Australian weather or something, or because we're definitely copying some English weather here at the moment.
The weather has been, well, in Ireland it's been shit, so I presume it's been the same over there. They're right beside us.
So something back onto the IL2 stuff. Something else that's upcoming is the upcoming damage model improvements for IL2.
Yes.
Have you two both seen the videos put out by Jason and the dev diaries?
I haven't. So if you'd like to give me a run through.
Okay, so
well, you know I have. So talk him through it.
Okay, so basically, they've decided that the already great damage modeling for IL2 is just not quite that good enough. So they've been working really hard on improving it. So now they've basically taken bullet physics and how bullets interact with the internals of the plane, and they've put that into the game beyond, well beyond the previous damage model. So now theory, wings won't rip off quite so easily, but if you hit the right spots enough times with the right shells,
You'll shatter the spars.
You'll shatter spars. You'll do damage like you should.
Nice.
It's
to go into that a little bit further, just to make it perfectly clear. As I understand it, at this point, the new damage model models the bullet physics and the shell physics and the internal interaction in the aircraft well enough that it is actually possible for you to shoot out a single cylinder in the engine block, not the entire engine block, one cylinder on its own.
Nice.
In theory, yes. So my understanding was that they were not going to do the engine damage modeling rework. However, during their testing, they worked out they really did need to do that at the same time. So which is why the patch has been delayed. So they're just doing more and more testing. And yeah, it's going to be a fantastic thing. Especially for people who like a particular American plane that was well known to be somewhat resilient to taking damage. A big boy, the nice P-47 is
nice.
Is hopefully going to be a whole lot more tanky for the damage.
That was one of my previous. Now I love IL2, but it was one of my previous bugbears that it was kind of a little bit too easy to fold an aircraft up like an accordion with a little bit of gunfire around the wing root. So it's really great news.
Yeah. So if you watch Jason's video, you'll see that planes are a lot less prone to just crumpling on a whim, and they are as much as we can sort of model that kind of thing. It's obviously they're not going to be shooting priceless warbirds like that with bullets to to get the simulations right, but
Yeah.
it's sort of it's
Well,
something that we should all look forward to, because it's just going to make the multiplayer just a lot better.
Well, as long as the next time I
Absolutely.
fly up my A20 and I take a up the arse, it doesn't cause every control surface on the back section of the aircraft to I would consider that a definite improvement, because
Well,
that's happened times than I care to admit at this point.
I can't guarantee that a 262 is not going to ram a 30mm shell up your ass and do that.
Okay, well, if a 262 does it, it's allowed, but it's when a random 30 cal just happens to clip the vertical stabilizer and the fucking rudder falls off that I've got a little bit of a problem. That has been an issue since the A20 came out. So, yeah, hopefully that will be solved. So, yeah, that sounds like some pretty good stuff going on that end.
What I'll
Is there
do,
anything else to bring in for?
I'm sort of having trouble trying to work out what I can say and what I can't say, for a couple of reasons, which I've covered
Is there a
previously.
red dot already working its way
Yeah.
across your room?
No, not yet. No, it's
To
fairly
be
safe.
clear, there's actually a couple of things we've got to watch out for here on this one, because
Yes.
Dead Meat's saying what he can say publicly, but he is part of the tester team and is under NDA, so he can only say what has been publicly announced, which this
Yeah.
is all public stuff. And as I understand it, we're going to be going on to Microsoft Flight Simulator a little bit later on in this, and Laobi's one of the bastards that actually has access to that as well, so he can't talk about certain things either.
Shit, yep. And there's a guy sitting in a bush outside my window here with a scope on me, so.
Meanwhile, I'm sitting in the
does he
center. I
have-
don't have access to either, so I can talk about like.
I'm guessing he has two weapons in hand.
He does.
One is concealed. The other
Disturbingly,
has
he's closer to the trigger with one than the other.
All right, so we'll jump on to the next section. DCS World. Obviously, a few things going on in DCS at this point in time. Two of the biggest things, although they're not exactly new news, I've been a little bit behind on these thanks to the human malware and everything else causing delays. But we've had two new developers join DCS World in 2020. Flying Iron Simulations and True Grit Virtual Technologies. I just wanted to run through because both of these have something interesting to bring. Flying Iron is, well, I say these guys, these are actually just a pair of brothers. It's not a full team, it's two blokes that actually run Flying Iron Simulations. I don't think they've expanded the team for this at all, which is pretty impressive considering that these are not technically new developers. They're just new to DCS. They're based out of Sydney, Australia, so they're just a bit north of us. And they're currently working on the LTV A7 Corsair 2 for DCS. That's going to be their entry into the platform. But they've also already completed a full fidelity version of the P47N, the Spitfire LF Mark 9, the Grob G109B, all for X-Plane 11, and these are the developers that are also working on the Lockheed F-117 Nighthawk for X-Plane 11.
Oh, I just made a mess of my pants.
Yeah. Really, I'll be honest up front. I'm really hoping that they develop the Corsair 2. I'm hoping it's fantastic, and then I hope they take their Nighthawk developments and stick that in DCS as well. That would be great. But before we get ahead of ourselves there, this is a two-man crew that's already got two full fidelity aircraft, and by all accounts, they are fantastically modeled. I haven't had a chance to fly them myself at this point, but they are apparently very, very, very good. One civilian space aircraft, they're already working on one modern military aircraft, and now they're going into DCS. And as I understand it, they're not stopping the X-plane development as well. So these are the first civil aviation developers, despite the fact that they're developing warbirds, but civil aviation developers that have actually moved over into DCS. And this is something, again, I think we discussed last time, that Eagle Dynamics really needed to start attracting these other aircraft developers from outside of the DCS space into DCS, because they do have experience. While it may not be with the DCS platform, they are experienced in flight model development and aircraft development, and some of them might have particular skill sets, particularly in regards to heavier aircraft or different types of aircraft that could be brought into the fray. And we're finally seeing one coming in.
I'd just like to point out the two warbirds for X-Plane, they do have the weapons modelled. You can actually activate the weapons and go shooting things down in X-Plane. I've never tried it myself. I've seen a video of it actually being put into practice, but I've not actually tried it myself. But it's something that's definitely on the cards if we can ever get the X-Plane 11 multiplayer to actually work, which is something I'd like to revisit with you at some point, Max.
Yeah, definitely.
Unfortunately, even with the update to X-Plane, it is multiplayer is still the ginger stepchild.
Oh yeah, that's. I'm hoping that now they've got the graphics engine on task. We should probably we'll cover this a bit more in detail later on. But yeah, hoping
we'll
that there's other hoping that there's going to be more improvements coming.
Yeah, the multiplayer really does need points of X-Plane. It's really a pain in the ass to deal with, as opposed to what we've seen for Microsoft Flight Simulator. But we'll come to that in a moment as well. But I'm really happy to actually see some of the larger spec devs come through, because as we said last time in our discussion, Laobi, the DCS's biggest problem at the moment is it's a niche within a niche.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really need to be. If the developers can start moving around and it can sort of come into mainstream just flight simulations, rather than being just, the guys who like to shoot one another that hide in the back corner, which is where it kind of is now, and get more people rolling through, both in terms of developers and players, this is going to be excellent for all. I would actually kind of like to see this work both ways. I would like to see more of the civil aviation developers come in and potentially bring in things like the C-17, the Hercules, or if you can think of any sort of general aviation plane or military aircraft that may not necessarily be combat, bring those into DCS. But simultaneously, see some of the DCS developers we already have. I'm not sure how the contracts with ED would work, but potentially bring some of their airframes, even if they were not weaponized, into something like X-Plane 11 or Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. I would quite happily fly Heatblur's F-14 up the Grand Canyon on Flight Simulator 2020 without a second thought. I would buy it twice for that.
I think the other advantage is it's a horse I've been kicking for years. Having civilian aircraft in DCS adds to the overall realism. I mean, most areas where military aircraft operate, you have civilian jets at 36,000 feet passing overhead. So it makes sense.
Yeah, I've actually got the civilian aircraft mod installed onto my DCS. I don't do much with it I haven't done many videos with it on the channel yet, and I don't use it for the multiplayer component because not everybody has it. But a lot of the missions you actually see me flying, if you're paying attention to the radar, you might see dots pop up in the distance if I'm pointing at the right angle. Most of the maps that I have on the Persian Gulf map in particular, I have incoming and outgoing air traffic coming in on the correct flight routes into all of, into Saudi Arabia and all through Emirates. So I have Airbuses in the sky and crap going on in the background while I'm up fighting in southern Iran. And it does bring a moment of stress in if you happen to be flying a flight and one of the fighters, you're flying a little bit further south, a bit towards the civilian airports, and one of the fighters you're trying to track gets loose and gets into that stream of airliners and all playing a game of hide and seek where if you pull the trigger on the wrong target, you kill 500 people.
Yes.
Well, virtually kill 500 people, but, it's a target you're not supposed to be hitting. And, there's potentially a hostile MiG that's hidden in amongst them there somewhere, and you've got to try and work out where the little bastard went. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see more of that in missions. They really need to look into it. I kind of partially understand why Eagle Dynamics hasn't put something like that in. But it is something you have to deal with in real life. So,
well, and the other thing is if they had a situation where they brought in maybe some map developers from outside and you had pretty much, most of the globe in a high detail, you would have, people who just fly general aviation or civilian stuff flying around. And it's one thing if you knock out an AI aircraft, maybe there's some kind of server punishment for it. But
Mm.
nothing beats, somebody screaming, calling you a cocksucker down the microphone for knocking them out of the air after a 14-hour flight from somewhere else,
Welcome to Steam Edition.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes. So yeah, that's their one crew, and like that's some interesting stuff that's going on there. Hopefully, we will see more of that in general and start getting the two communities sort of more closely linked together. I think there would be a lot of room for growth on both sides for that. The other, and obviously this is the one that everyone's talking about at the moment, the other team that has been brought in is True Grit Virtual Technologies, and of course, the Eurofighter Typhoon. Now, there's a couple of things that have come out to it. The Grim Reapers did a interview with them a while back. Well, just a couple of days ago, I think. I only became aware of it today. Got some information out of that, but most of this has been public released beforehand. This team, all right, so most DCS developers, they're obviously pretty dedicated to their platforms and they work very closely with the actual manufacturers of the aircraft and the pilots of the aircraft in order to try and get the aircraft that they're trying to model correct. In that case, this isn't going to be a problem. The guy in charge of True Grit, and I'm probably going to pronounce his name here wrong, but Jero Fink, I think is the
Sounds
pronunciation.
good.
He's actually a former pilot of the Luftwaffe, 15 years flying experience in the Typhoon, and a former instructor, and he's leading the team. So they don't need to work with pilots. The team itself actually has several members that are former Typhoon pilots or instructors themselves. With the artists and programmers, this is actually a little bit of an interesting one as well. One of the lead programmers for the Eurofighter Typhoon is actually the former lead programmer for Falcon BMS, has jumped over. This is almost an all-star team for developing this particular aircraft.
This is the one that has me really throbbing because the one thing when I'm buying an aircraft for DCS, the one thing I look for is some kind of provenance. It's fine, if you've developed a number of aircraft, but if you're a developer and you also either have, high profile access to an SME or even SME in your team, it becomes kind of an insta buy for me. I'm sure there are a few other weirdos like me out there as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. And there's a couple of other things with this one as well. Like this is a fully licensed aircraft. They've gotten a license through Germany. My German is terrible, so I will try and I'll post this into chat because I have no idea how to pronounce this. I'll be perfectly honest. But this is the group that they licensing was done through. They have a license for the German version of the Eurofighter in particular, although apparently they are going to try and work on the others. But obviously they're based out of Germany. They're all former German Luftwaffe pilots. So they will be focusing on the platform that they are most familiar with, which is the German version, because not all versions of the Eurofighter Typhoon are the same. Depending on which nation is running them, there are actually personal customizations done by each individual nation that make each airframe slightly different. Also, at this point, this is the interesting one. All the airframes that we have in DCS up until this point are airframes that are either have been in long service and been completely declassified or almost completely declassified, or they're airframes that have gone out of service, that are no longer in active service. The Eurofighter was only introduced officially in 2003. It is very much in active service still at this moment, and most of the aircraft, at least in the current blocks, is currently classified. And they're still trying to work out exactly what block and version they're going to be working with. The assumption is it's probably going to be one of the earlier versions at this time, and it's probably going to be a bit of a, let's say, not pure version, because even in the earlier blocks there is probably going to be some systems they won't be able to model correctly or they won't be able to model at all, so they may need to bastardize some of the systems in order to get around the actual the classifications that are still running on the aircraft. But Yeah.
Well, IFF is always going to be an issue
Mm.
with every aircraft. But I think if they go with, the earliest possible, like I don't care how old or how young it is. I just, my particular boner is for as much authenticity as possible.
Mm. Yes. Absolutely. Like things like the ECM is
Yeah.
definitely not going to be modeled accurately. But then again, ECM
Yeah.
isn't modeled any DCS as it is. And in my opinion, it's one of those things that doesn't have to be. As far
Yeah.
as I'm concerned, they can just give it a generic feature, flick a button, and it could be entirely unrealistic.
Yeah.
Effect
And none of
happens.
us will know.
Yeah, I have absolutely no idea. I've never flown a type idea CM works. If I flick a button and missiles are less likely to shoot me down, that's good enough for me. I will believe it. It's fine.
Okay.
Um,
For what I know
yep.
about it, they're planning on releasing Tranche 1 first, and then because the Eurofighter is so modular, their plan is to basically make the updated versions as like modules. There's no sort of confirmation of how they're going to actually make these modules available, whether they're going to be paid or just free additions to the existing module. Although the impression is that they're going to be free additions to the module, so we'll get the Tranche 1 model and then
Yeah.
go from there.
Which is
It's
interesting in its own way because that particular model, which is the one I'll be going because obviously it's the earliest version, it has no air ground capability at all.
Yeah.
It's a pure air to air platform. High altitude interceptor is what its primary designation is. So that is going to be a bit of fun to fly from the combat area. The biggest part is exactly what are they going to have to base it up against at this point. Although I suppose that's not really too much of an issue. Even at the earliest block, it still lines up with most of the aircraft that we currently have. Like it's
Yeah.
not far out of the boundaries of the F-18C we currently have.
Yeah.
And
It's
it's
fixed for
only a
5 years.
a few years newer than the 50 block that we've got for the F-16. So it's in the ballpark anyway. Those
Yeah.
aircraft would have flown at, side by side at some point.
Yeah.
So yeah, should be fun regardless. But still, this is a platform I would have been if end of last year, if somebody asked me, will we get a Eurofighter Typhoon, I would have said, there is no chance we will get a Typhoon. Turns
Well,
out that not only are we getting a Typhoon, but we're getting a Typhoon that's actually being built by a former instructor and pilot of an actual Typhoon.
yeah.
2020 is just a weird fucking year, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's like, we're all locked in, but we're getting goodies thrown at us right, left, and center.
All I'm waiting for at this point in time is give me a C-130 and somebody announce an Apache, and I may die of either the orgasm or the happiness that follows. I'm not entirely sure which one will kill.
130 would be
Yeah.
nice.
So hopefully we'll find some more information about that soon enough. I am going to try with these guys, and I'm going to try and get in contact with Flying Iron as well because I'm really interested in their perspective on things, especially.
Mags, I'll just
Yes.
remind you of the email that I exchanged and forwarded on to you regarding that.
Yes.
We're already in contact with them.
Yes.
So
I didn't want to let that out just yet.
too late.
Dead meat.
Too late. I was too excited about that one.
You dick.
But
Yes. Well,
going back to the
Spoiler alert.
the DCS, the add-on, the commercial traffic add-on. I'd be very, very keen to whip out the CE2 and the Yak 52 and just do some flights with all the traffic there.
Yeah. Well, actually, there's some really interesting stuff you can do with that too. Like, I don't know if you recall, but I was actually working on a mission at one point that I didn't quite have the right combination of aircraft for. I'm still waiting for the right ones to show up. But essentially, I was going to have a civilian air defense mission where you had an unarmed radar-equipped aircraft. I was probably going to work with either the F-14, although it's kind of God mode when it comes to its radar, or the F-18. But it wouldn't have any weapons and it wouldn't have any ammo. The second aircraft would be a trainer that only has machine guns and radar. Take your pick. We got a few options for those. And the third would be either the CE2 or the Yak-52. And the CE2 or the Yak-52 would essentially be a drug running plane trying to escape across the mountains, with the F-18 trying to hunt it, or the F-18 or the F-14 trying to on radar in order to give directions to the armed trainer to track it down and try and stop it. Playing
That's a
with
mission
civilian
I'd play.
aircraft can be playing with civilian aircraft can be a hell of a lot of fun when you start thinking outside of the box.
Yeah.
And then if you want to have some real fun, let's throw 20 AI civilian aircraft into that area. So not only do you have to locate the civilian aircraft that's trying to run, you've got to locate the right civilian aircraft and intercept it without shooting down somebody who's just, having a sightseeing tour.
Yeah.
I have no conscience.
You just shoot them all. The civilian aircraft, they really start the outside the box options and what else it can add, because there's definitely some stuff there. But we will be we will be getting in touch and organizing something with Flying Iron and True Grit at some point in the future, I hope. Maybe either here or at least in of some kind, because I'm really interested in following both, particularly Flying Irons as well, because I really want their perspective as a developer that has experience and already has produced high fidelity modules for another platform coming into DCS. I think it's going to be a really interesting look from the outside. So moving on from that, the last thing for DCS has, of course, and get everyone's opinions on these. I think I know yours, Dead Meat. I'm interested in yours, Laobi, but the DCS Supercarrier module that Wags has been cock teasing us with for like 6 months at this point. The last update, we finally got the Supercarrier operations guide. I was actually having a browse through it right before we started this live stream, and it's got some pretty interesting stuff inside of it on how it all functions and the detail that's gone into it. And of course, we've all seen the videos at this point. It looks amazing. I'm particularly interested in it for those looks, or in particular the lighting features. My biggest issue with the standard Stennis is I can't fucking see the goddamn thing half the time, and I can't see the meatball on it, and the lighting on the new one looks a hell of a lot brighter and a hell of a lot easier to see. I might actually be able to fly into it at nighttime without crashing into its ass. Curious on what everyone else has seen of it. Now we've actually launches, recoveries, and the rest on it.
That's an optimistic opinion there, Mags. One thing with the existing Stennis is I think part of the problem with you having trouble with the meatball is that the carrier is not the right size. It's like 60% of the size it should be, or something along those lines, if I remember rightly.
It could be. It's more of just a lighting issue. The for my eyes, and I know people that do not have my condition, but a few of them are older pilots. The rest who don't have perfect eyes and aren't in the prime of their youth, that have real trouble spotting the lighting and the details and the marking on that thing until you are very close. And by the time you get to that close point, you're already seconds away from touching down, so it doesn't matter. Anything that can improve that at this point in time is definitely a plus for me, and something that I'm going to have to pick up, because I like flying off carriers. Trying to land an aircraft on a postage stamp is fantastic. I just like to be able to see the postage stamp every now and again.
But that's the issue. I love flying off carriers, but I fucking hate landing on them. And I think the Stennis will be, the new improved Stennis. It's just going to be massive. It's really the way to go. Particularly, they're going to introduce the lower decks and the elevator system. For somebody even who just wants to jump in a mission, they're going to have an LSO station. And it's definitely the right way to go. Additionally, you'll have corrected ATC. And I'm hoping that will kind of spill over then, that when people see how the ATC should work, they'll start going, hey guys, we need to sort out the ground-based ATC.
Yeah, fit it to all the runways and fit it to everything else. Yeah.
You'll hear me grumbling in anger there.
Yeah, this is
They
this is one of
this
Dead Meat's complaints.
the ATC stuff should be part of the fucking base game. You shouldn't have to pay an extra to get something that should be part of the base game.
Mm.
That's
Yeah,
one of my biggest complaints about this carrier module. The other
I
thing
think,
is that I can understand them not wanting the full functionality of the new carrier to be available to people who don't own it on
yeah,
multiplayer servers, but it just rubbed me the wrong way when I read that they're not going to allow you to even catch the
catch
arrest
the wire.
warrants.
Yeah, that was one of the issues that I still do have with it a little bit. It's I was under the impression that if you had the Supercarrier module, obviously you would have access to the Supercarrier module's functionality, and you'd have access to all the stuff that comes with that. You would see the ground crews and the rest, and blah 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 blah. If you didn't have that module, that Supercarrier would just be displayed as the Stennis. But the wires would function the same way. So you'd come in for a landing, you'd catch the wire, but you wouldn't have all the approaches or any of the other garbage. It would just be a carrier. So those that have the module get all the fancy bonuses. Those that don't still have a wire to catch, and it's still a deck they can park on or a deck they can spawn on, but they will just see it as a regular Stennis. And it might look a bit strange from those who do have the module watching somebody in an F-14 Tomcat run over half the deck crew in order to rush up and get onto the plate. But that's just one of the joys of multiplayer. I mean,
yeah,
we've all seen some of the funny stuff in there. Record it off,
yeah.
have a little bit of a laugh, make a meme about F-14 pilot kills half deck crew on carrier. Everybody have a good chuckle, move on. That isn't the
That's
case.
that's I think one of now I'm going to kind of take a little bit of a devil's advocate approach here, but
Mm.
I think one of the issues you may get, particularly on public multiplayer servers, is people landing when they shouldn't,
Yes.
and basically wiping out everything on the fucking deck. I I'm kind of caught between the two. I can see why they did what they did, because at the end of the day, they're in business. Uh, Additionally, yeah, I think the ATC should spill out across the entire game, not just the other carriers, but the entire game. But at, at the same time, I can see, I can see the reason for not kind of allowing people to land on the deck of the
Mm.
supercarrier. And one of the reasons is you'll get idiots fucking things up. Well, you'll get that anyway. Really, it's
Well, that's the thing is, you're going to get it anyway. You're
yeah,
going to be able to catch a wire.
yeah,
But do you think for a second that Supercarrier module is going to come out and somebody isn't going to try and land a KA-50 shark in the center of it,
oh
or land a
yes,
Huey in it, or
yeah,
well, have a look at the non-carrierized aircraft,
yeah,
non-carrier based aircraft. There's people that have successfully landed the MiG-21 on a carrier and taken off
yeah.
again without using the wires. They are going to land on that just because they can,
I'm
and
gonna
they will
jump.
do it in the middle of a multiplayer mission.
I'm going to
Yeah.
jump in a vegan. If I see that new carrier on there, I'm gonna jump on a vegan. I'm gonna sink that fucking thing.
I would actually go one further and say they probably should have made it so that you just pass through it if you don't own it.
Well, at that point, you've got to sort of start going, well, why have it there at all? And
Yeah,
they needed to have it there because the problem with the carrier module, and it's why it's such a virtual module, is much like the maps. And this is, again, something I don't agree with the maps. I still think IL2 has a better system than this, but they are things that divide the community. And I will
yeah,
say, I do not like anything that divides the community. I had no interest in the carrier module until they sorted that one out. The maps still annoy me. Now, just for those watching who may not be familiar with how IL2 does, even if you do not own the module that a map in IL2 comes with, you get it by default and are able to access it in multiplayer. So the maps in IL2 never divide the community. 20 expansion packs could be released with 20 different maps, and you will always be able to join the servers regardless of what maps they're doing. The only restriction in IL2 is what planes you can fly. You can even man the gunner stations in aircraft that you don't have access to because you don't own the packs, but you cannot select them to fly. You can only select the aircraft that you personally own. in DCS, they're making the mistake that first-person shooters stopped doing this years ago as well for exactly the same reason. Those might remember the sort of end 2010s, early 2010s. There was a lot of complaints online, particularly in the like the Call of Duty communities and I think the Battlefield communities as well, as about map packs being released. And if you bought these packs, you could only play with people that had also bought these packs. And what you got was these maps were the dividing point, subdividing the community down. And these were huge communities, but people were still complaining about these maps dividing everything down and not giving access. And eventually they took that away, and generally maps just became a free thing that was released for the most part. Not all
Vegas.
games still do it, but most do.
So Rainbow Six Vegas 2 was one of those big
Yeah.
wedges in the community for that. They eventually
Yeah.
released the maps for free after the after the
After enough of it fired
backlash.
up. Yeah, but this is still happening in the DCS community right now. The maps are only available for those who have them. And if somebody, let's say your local map designer designs a big PvE massive event on Persian Gulf, if you don't have the Persian Gulf map, you can't join that. Somebody wants to do a NTTR red flag type event. If you don't have the NTTR map, you can't join that. You're completely divided off from the rest of the community. And it's something that DCS needs to take a look at, because you're subdividing a community that's already niche in doing it.
Yeah.
I had no interest in the carrier because the carrier was going to be a physical model, an item that was going to do the same thing. If you didn't have the carrier module originally, you weren't going to be able to join multiplayer servers that featured the carrier module, which meant instantly no multiplayer server was ever going to feature it once it was released. And Eagle Dynamics was told as much, which is why they changed that. This system is also, for the record, why you will find that most multiplayer servers still run Caucasus, even though there are other maps available. It's because everybody has it.
It's why I actually have 2 DCS servers running. One will always be running on a Caucasus mission. The other will be, one of the others. Which, speaking of which, Laobi, we still need to do some more World War II stuff for DCS, and I have that variable attack mission that I have up at the Caucasus one. There's actually a Normandy version of that now, which I have available, which I've been waiting for you to actually get sorted so we can actually jump on and give it a try.
Shit together.
Yes.
Just to come back just a little bit, I'm going to play devil's advocate again, just a little bit on the maps. Again, I'm somewhere in the middle on that, in the sense that they're the games are in a sense they're apples and oranges, pricing model wise. Obviously, DCS, you get the free map and kind of 2 modules, where IL2, it's you get a map, all the modules, and basically everything you need for $60. So I can see, there's a reason to kind of nickel and dime things, and particularly maps and aircraft in DCS, because it is the only source of income. But I'm not sure, and I'm not being a marketing person, it's not my area of expertise, so I'm not sure what the results of changing that would be. I've heard some people in the community say, oh, maybe we'll have a subscription model, but if any game I played started a subscription model, I would be out of it so fast. It's I played WoW for a few years back in the day. No.
Yeah, they're not popular now. Although they're not necessarily terrible if done right. I still use Microsoft as a perfect example at the moment. Access to their entire games library, and it's not a game subscription service. Obviously, it's for a client, but access to their entire games library, and it's just pay $5 Australian a month and just have the lot. We'll give you all the brand new games when they come out. We'll just thing on there. That's a reasonable cost that I'm willing to pay. Once anything beyond that, though, I wouldn't. Like if it was $10, I wouldn't have that service. I wouldn't pick it up. That's too much. $5, that's in my I have that much shrapnel a month easily that I waste, so I will do that.
Oh
But at
yeah,
the same time, it's a matter of thing. It's actually why I wanted to mention at the start that modification to the event they're running now, if they ever run one of these in the future, to extend the maps, make all the maps available simultaneously, and extend the length that those maps are available over that event for the free fly event for the entire
yeah,
thing, so people have a chance to fly on them and actually have a look at them to see whether or not they're worth the money. Like I've flown around on these. I was always going to get them. I create content for DCS.
yeah,
Having flown a lot on them, I know that they're worth it from my end.
yeah.
So
I
I
think
would have bought them with that information. But if you don't have that information, being able to look at them free might be a way to, at the very least, make it clear why they're worth that
yeah,
much in the first place.
I think
Have a bit of a
a great way of doing it may have been have a week where you have Normandy, and then every 2 days you have a different aircraft: the FW190, D9, the A8, the BF109, the Spitfire, the P51, and have that week where you have the map and setting for those aircraft, and
mm,
then have another week where you have free Persian Gulf, you have the F-18, the F-16, and the F-14, and have a week by week system where you have the map, the whole set as such for that particular map. I think it would have been a great idea. But I think in part, it's probably like everybody else. This, the Wuhan flu has hit everybody so fast that everybody's going, "Fuck, what'll I do? I need to make money."
mm. Actually, we're talking back about the carrier because we've gone a little bit on that one there, and
Mm,
spilling the ATC over on the maps. That could actually be a way of sort of justifying the cost. If
yeah,
ATC was functioning correctly across all the maps, so the maps weren't just maps, um, but they actually had some more appropriate functionality attached to them. Maybe that
yeah.
would be the way for it. But regardless, that is something that definitely needs to be. It's definitely something I think they need to look at,
I think it
and
should
the
be the first
ATC is something
priority.
that should be standard. I'd also like to see the other thing. I'm looking at doing a little bit of it myself, and I've seen a few do it. Actually, do ATC work and AWACS AWACS work in DCS.
Yeah,
I think they're going to have a couple of parts for the carrier module that are actually designed for that. That should be something that's universal as well. Actually, having dedicated player slots on the maps for people who want to do that
yeah,
role that will have access to a set of tools that are. I know we have the F10 map obviously already, but an improved set of tools,
yeah,
perhaps with some plotting data as well, so notes can actually be made by whoever's playing ATC or AWACS, so they can actually keep a note and a record of everything within the game, within the game's client itself,
yeah.
on what is going on, who's coming from where, what's what, and the rest. Potentially, yeah, just improve the functionality on that payoff as well. That should be
Absolutely.
standard. That should be standard stuff for it.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
that should be first on their priority list. The
mm,
ATC before anything else. The ATC needs to be sorted out, because even if you go into X-Plane or
mm.
a few other sims, ATC is generally like on point.
Yeah, and it's something I think that needs to be developed. I mean, you would know better than anybody else for this one, Dead Meat, but I believe they announced a while back that they were going to be working on what was essentially an AWACS ATC game commander, like air commander controller position in IL2 as well.
I don't know if it's quite that thing. That
GCI, is it?
it's
Mm,
it's Marshall. I think Air Marshal or something like that.
mm,
It's I don't actually even know what that entails yet.
mm.
Probably
The desc-
probably
the
breaking
description I
NDA
got
for
was a
this,
bit of a.
but you know,
I don't break NDA.
well, I don't know
Yeah,
if
please don't.
it's not. It's as
Mm.
far as I'm aware that's we haven't been told anything about it. So it
Okay, okay, that's.
it might be there, or they may have released it, or they might be still working on it. I have no idea. I have not
Yeah,
looked into
I
that at
only have
all.
the
I'm
initial
not.
mention of it, which was
Yep.
actually about a year back point in time, and it was understand it was an air controller type position where a player would be able to issue orders, instructions, and potentially notify pilots of actions that were occurring on the map and play and be able to direct aircraft to particular areas. So it may not be exactly the same thing, but it's functionally similar concept of actually having air traffic control, or an AWACS position would be in DCS. It would be the equivalent. At least that was the original mention for. No idea if it's still going through, but the fact that they were looking at putting that into IL2 as well. So the civil flight sims have this. IL2 is at least considering it, may have it under development. We just haven't seen anything more of it yet. May have scrapped it. We just don't know anything about that. And they just haven't mentioned it again.
It's not been scrapped, but other than that, I don't know anything about it. I'm not part of that team, so I couldn't break NDA on that if I wanted to.
All right, so that's good. But so that's actually a thing going on there. When everybody else is doing it, yeah, Eagle Dynamics probably needs to look at that for DCS. There definitely needs to be some improvements in there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, all right. So that's we went up. This was all supposed to be an uplifting thing for DCS this week, because I had a lot of good stuff. I was excited about the teams, and we ended up ragging on them about their maps and everything else again. It always happens. Moving on. All right. So Deadmeat, this one here is all for you, because you've actually tested this at this point. X-Plane 11's first beta for the Vulkan API implementation.
Okay.
What'd you find?
Okay, I'm going to preface anything I say after this first sentence with this comment. It's great, but it feels like too little, too late. But for AMD users, they're seeing, like AMD graphics card users, we're seeing up to 100% performance improvement. Just let that sink in for a second. An absolute doubling in frame rate.
I can confirm that also with Nvidia.
Nvidia, I'm not seeing a doubling in frame rate. However, what I am seeing, I'm seeing probably a 20 to 30% improvement on my end. But that doesn't tell the whole story. There's part of it that with the OpenGL renderer, you may have noticed that even if you are getting a good frame rate, let's be honest, no one ever got a good frame rate with OpenGL in X-Plane.
No.
If they say they do, they're lying. But you know, the whole community's, you know, convinced that 30 frames a second is acceptable. But yes, we won't touch on that because I want this to be a positive. After my initial first sentence, yes. I'm going to try keep it positive. So the one thing that's not mentioned is that with the OpenGL renderer, there's these micro stutters, these pauses. You'll be like banking around, you'll be getting a good frame rate, but you'll see that the scenery just hitch a little bit. You'd see buildings sort of fade into view, but the buildings are fading into view a lot closer than you feel they should. With Vulkan, now keeping in mind my only experience with Vulkan is in VR, I experienced the ability to basically be able to actually max all the sliders, including the reflections, which that's impressive. I could max all of the sliders and still get a usable frame rate. I actually maxed all of the sliders and took off from Meigs, RIP. Just to preface that, Meigs Airfield is an airfield in Chicago that was actually bulldozed by the mayor in some shading dealings that he actually got fined heavily for. He actually went and got it bulldozed in the middle of the night, leaving a whole heap of people's planes stuck on the airfield, which they actually had to get FAA approval to take off from the taxiway to get them out of there.
Christ, Harrison Ford at the time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, not landing there, just taking off.
Oh, not landing there, taking off.
Yeah. No, he landed in the golf course.
Harrison. Yes, he landed on the golf course. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I was able to max all the sliders at Meigs and take off and get an acceptable frame rate. It wasn't smooth. There was a little bit of, little bit low frame rate, but it was acceptable.
And this is in VR, just to
And
clarify
this
again.
is in VR, so they've made massive performance leaps, which is what they needed.
Yeah. I think
Keeping in mind it's also still a beta. It's the first beta, so there's still much room for improvement.
I think another disclaimer is worthwhile, which is your mileage may vary.
Yes.
Because in 2D, using Nvidia and a 4790K 32 gig RAM, I'm getting basically 100% increase on frame rates, and that's with all the pretty features turned up. In VR, I have to pull some of those features back, and I'm getting about 20%, enough to fly in VR. Where previously, it was like receiving a series of fucking postcards about a flight sim. So it's definitely an improvement. I mean, why they went with OpenGL in the first place, obviously they wanted to be all things to all people, which I think was a big mistake. Because if you buy a Mac, the punishment for buying an overpriced computer is that you're not going to be able to play games on it.
I object to you calling it a computer. It's not a computer, it's a fashion accessory.
Right. Well, the children who make it call it a computer.
So the reasoning besides the wanting to be all things all people for the OpenGL thing, it's not only Mac, but it's also Linux.
Yeah.
So I'm actually quite happy about that, because I'm seriously contemplating running off Linux on my PC again and seeing if I can switch over again. But that's a completely other topic, not for this podcast. But the reason for the OpenGL thing is because at the time when they first decided on OpenGL, it was the best option. The DirectX of the time was it was garbage, to put it simply. When X-Plane first came out, DirectX was in its
94.
It was in its very early days, like DirectX 2 or 3, I think it was at that time. And I actually had a DirectX 3 capable video card back in the day, and I experienced games running on DirectX 2 and 3 back in the day, and it had
it was pants.
It had 3D Now support. And it was cool, but then I went and played OpenGL Quake, and then it was not so cool. But it's it's just a legacy of that. They made that decision back then when OpenGL was the best option to choose.
Yeah.
And then
but I think
and they've stuck with it for so long just because they were focusing
just
on
because they were
other
used
things.
to it.
Used to it, and they didn't want to lose that portability and
Well, it's also how X-Plane's actually away. X-Plane 11 is the most recent version of the game, but functionally an update from X-Plane 10, which was functionally an update from X-Plane 9. So it's all the same engine, just polished up and essentially resold on a massive patch update. There are differences between them, of course, and improvements that they did, but each one is just an improved iteration of the previous version. So the engine itself and the entirety of X-Plane has been dragging on for quite some time at this point. I'm not entirely sure when the last rebuild would have been, but I know it wasn't in 9, 10, and it definitely wasn't in 11. So it could be at least 3, possibly 4, possibly more iterations old at this point.
What this Vulkan, the move to Vulkan, does enable is, firstly, we're getting the immediate results of better performance, which is absolutely fantastic. It's something we've been we've been hankering for years, and they
Yeah.
should have done it years ago. But once they've tuned it a little bit and eked a bit more performance out of it, just to go back to the performance part of it, just quickly, one thing
It's amazing.
that does affect the performance, your Vulkan performance in X-Plane 11, is video RAM. It's very sensitive to video RAM, whereas OpenGL wasn't. So that's one thing. If you're finding you're not getting the performance leap you're expecting, it's likely that you've run out of video RAM, and it's paging to system memory.
Yeah.
So
So
lower your settings and you'll get the improvement you're expecting.
It has been beyond my expectations. I have to say, I sat there and I didn't know which stick to grab. I was just so happy with the improvement. I got a chance there yesterday morning, and I've been over the moon. Like, you can now have, on a decently spec'd machine, you obviously your mileage may vary, but you can now have more or less all the bells and whistles if you're playing 2D, and it looks stunning. And if you have a little bit of ortho for XP or a little bit of scenery on it, it looks even better.
All right. So speaking of not to grab, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, and this one here's the one I wanted to finish up on. They just did a couple of days ago now. They did their release for the multiplayer update video on exactly how it worked. And there are a couple of parts for this that just blew me the hell away. Got to watch this one. I'm not even sure if you can sort of virtually nod your head to stuff here or exactly what you're allowed to say being under NDA. But just to go through for those who haven't seen it yet, and basically the key points is the game is always, or Microsoft Flight Simulator always going to render one world by default. So all players and real life pilots will be on the server at the same time. Now, what I mean by that is the simulation actually has a live air traffic monitor built into it that is tracking all the real world traffic that's moving around the world. And then it is creating a copy of that real world traffic within the simulation at all times. So if there is a 747 or an Airbus that's flying across the Atlantic in real life at a moment, that 747 or Airbus will exist within Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, and you will be able to fly up with it, fly in formation with it, and it will follow the flight path of the real aircraft as if the real aircraft was writing a instruction for, like, writing out the flight path for the virtual aircraft in real time.
On the advice of my attorney, I can neither confirm nor deny that's the case, but yes.
All right, so and
don't go following any Malaysian Airways aircraft, by the way.
and watch out for the people drawing cocks in the sky.
Yes.
Yeah, that happens a lot more often than you would expect.
I will interject with a rumor I've heard that I made up. I heard that they're getting Air Force Proud 95 to do the voice of ATC.
That would be amazing.
I'm just going to move on from that. But this just doesn't just include major air traffic either. It's small aircraft. If, for example, you want to go for a flight down, if you're running open settings and you want to go for a flight down the Grand Canyon at ridiculous speeds in whatever fast plane you've got, and there happens to be a tracked scenic flight going down the Grand Canyon as well, that should be present within the simulation, and you should wind up buzzing the scenic aircraft.
I look forward to seeing the bush planes.
Yeah, the bush planes. What gets cool from there is that's the base setup. Now, that'll be operating on real-world time and will be running real-world weather at all times with real-world tracking at all times. From there, to go through the game, what they've done is they've created a filter set. Now, there should be 3 filter sets that they've mentioned so far. One is, the first one is live players, which is everything real, all the real traffic. All the virtual players will be present in the space as well, obviously. The second one is a player restriction, that allows you to choose whether or not you want to have the real aircraft represented virtually, and also choose whether or not what time of day and what kind of weather you want. So that's where you can play around a little bit and do what you want to do. And the third one is a group restricted one where you can set your weather conditions, whatever conditions you actually want, and select a group of people that you want to join you, and nobody will be represented outside of that. In addition to all of that, they brought out the information on the actual restrictions on what you'll be able to see. Because remember, it's one thing to track that many aircraft around the world at once, potentially. It's another thing to be able to actually see them. Now, it's not going to be able to render them all at once. Obviously, nobody's computer is going to be able to render all at once. What they're doing instead, in multiplayer, every aircraft within 200 kilometers of the pilot, of the player, you, will be tracked in real time at all times. However, for rendering purposes, only the closest 50 aircraft to you will actually be rendered over that 200 kilometer range. So if you've got 50 aircraft within 200 meters of you, you'll be able to see them all. If there's only one and there's 100 planes within 200 kilometers, 50 of them will be rendered out to 200 kilometers. The other 50 will only be tracked on radar, or tracked via ATC, depending on what aircraft you're in and whether or not that's one of
And that
this.
makes total
Yeah,
sense.
this makes total sense from the standpoint of how the hell are you going to render the aircraft once.
Yeah.
But if you haven't seen the video already, you really need to watch it because there is some beautiful formation flying. And the other side of this is the game is being set up, or the simulation is being set up to support simulation flyouts where 50 people can fly aircraft side by side and go on a joy flight through wherever the hell you want. And they can do it in an environment where they can check up their ATC and there are real world aircraft that are flying in and out of runways. Like for an example, actually go back to X-Plane. Without the correct mods, X-Plane's runways can feel rather dead, much like DCS. Actually, DCS is another perfect example. DCS's runways can feel rather dead. Well, if you decide to fly in Flight Simulator 2020 in the open settings completely on your own and you fly into an international airport, regardless of your settings, if you're flying them open, you will see the real world air traffic coming in and out. There will be aircraft taxiing around that are modeled. There will be real world players that are flying in and out and doing all of their things all at once at all times. You will always see life in the airports if there is actually life at those airports. If it's a dead airfield that nobody's flying out of and nothing's being tracked out of, well, it will be dead because nothing's supposed to be there. This is nobody's ever tried anything like this, despite having it, despite the technology to actually track real flights like this actually have been available for some time. I think there's a couple of mods you can get for, I think, Prepared
X-Plane.
and X-Plane that you can
X-Live.
put this kind of stuff in. But to
Excellent.
have this base installed in the game by default, this is what you get. Holy shit.
And it makes a hell of a difference because when it's built into the engine, you know yourself, the more mods you're running, generally the more strain that it puts on your system. But when it's already built into the engine, it tends to be much more streamlined. And it works.
Yeah, this is the big killer for Flight Simulator 20. It's not just that this is a beautiful looking thing from what we've seen so far. If you want, you can make X-Plane beautiful. But to do it, first you've got to install X-Plane. Then you've got to install all the ortho scenery. Then you've potentially got to put paid mods in for your select runways or select environments in order to be able to, well, there are some free ones as well. So there's free ones available, but paid mods is the way most people do it in order to get your towns, cities, runways looking as they should. Then you've got to install your aircraft. Then you've got to install additional mods in order to be able to get your real life feeling, planes coming and going and that kind of stuff actually happening. And then you've got to fight with the multiplayer in order to be able to actually do the multiplayer side of it.
Yeah.
Flight Simulator 2020, you're going to have to install it.
Yeah. Everything. They've done a lot. Obviously, they've been watching the communities quite closely. And you can see they've really done the groundwork, and without actually giving away anything or breaking any NDAs, they have done the groundwork on this. It's X-Plane is a little bit like, the older guy who marries dumps his wife and marries a 20-something, and suddenly, he's getting her teeth done and buying her tits. And X-Plane has always kind of been like that, where this is wife 2.0, really.
Yeah, it's everything that you would normally mod into a flight simulation, including sims like DCS. As I said, I mentioned before, I've got a civilian traffic mod for exactly this reason in DCS installed on usage. It's everything that you would mod into a flight simulation, regardless of what flight simulation it is, in order to get that feeling. And everything's there by default. So all you're going to need to worry about, there will still be mods because nothing is ever perfect. There will be, I'm sure, runway overhauls. There'll be somebody who knows their local runway and does a mod to fix it up and get all the buildings in the right spot and all the right colors. And this is the flight simulation community. We're full of rivet counters. There are going to be people that go through. Yeah, there's going to be people that go through and photograph the roofs of the hangars of their local airport in order to make sure that the hangars are accurately represented inside of the flight sim. Like, this will be a thing. But
there was a dude on the forums complaining that his house wasn't correct.
I have already run through in my head a few ideas of how I can get the models and textures updated for my local airport and surrounding areas.
Well, actually, that's one of the things.
Even if I had to volunteer to do the aerial photography myself, I'd happily learn to fly the real plane and do the flights myself to get that material for them.
And this will happen. And I actually sort of hope they have some some open modding support type stuff, because you're going to get rivet counters that want to work on their local airports and make it all fine and make the aircraft places that they're going to fly VFR, right.
Yeah.
And then just make them so you can download those areas, and there will be upgrades. I hope they really do support that well, and I think they will. But the fact that it doesn't need it, it's an option, but it's not going to be a requirement. Where you really need it on some of the other sims. Actually, a really beautiful version talking about the human malware at the moment. A perfect example of this. A couple of weeks ago, DebMeat did a live stream in X-Plane 11 and decided to fly out of Wuhan. There isn't a city there. It's a runway in the middle of a plain with mountains off the edge. There's no city.
China, unfortunately, when it comes to aerial photography, China is a bit of a black spot. This is a China issue rather than a simulator issue.
Fuck it, we'll get satellite footage. I'll pay for the
I've
satellite
already
to
got
do
it.
the flyover.
Yeah,
well,
it's
sure
a major China issue.
Yeah. Well,
you'll notice parts of Russia as well are quite similar.
Like the parts where you'd find a chronoplan?
Yeah, the parts where you find, the other 1 million people who have died of whatever disease it was, or
shit. Yeah,
sorry, Mags.
It's fine. Yes, like this is just, these are nice options to have, but they're going to have this by default built into the game. Essentially, all the core mods that you would normally take, and from there you're only going to have to grab whatever special updates have been done for the particular areas you want to fly into, and obviously because your aircraft modules are going to work pretty much exactly the same way. You're going to have professional developers. It's essentially going to be just like it is now on X-Plane, like it was on Flight Simulator 10, and like it is on DCS. You'll have developers that develop the third-party aircraft. You will probably get some bad developers because that tends to be a thing. You'll also get some absolutely amazing developers who do incredible detailed work, and you pick up what you want and fly it out. The only bit that I was just going to say, the only bit that I'm sort of curious about at this point, and this is the big thing, and I haven't seen an answer for this yet. They're modeling the whole world and all of the aircraft that are flying in it, and of the virtual and real pilots that are flying in it all at once. And you have the ability in the base version to be able to see all of these pilots if you fly within X range of them.
How are they
But
going to
there's not going to
handle the
be every
models?
single well, no, it's not going to be every single type of aircraft in the base structure for the plane. So is it going to be? Are they going to do at least an AI equivalent for most common commercial aircraft and just go with those to start with? Or and what happens with specific aircraft models? Say if Dead Meat here owns a
Kit Fox.
Kit Fox, and I've got a Catalina, but he doesn't have the Catalina, and I don't have the Kit Fox, and we both fly to the same area. Will he see my Catalina? I see his Kit Fox. Is the base aircraft module going to be have a 3D model that is available in the base of the game just to represent the other aircraft by default in the way they're working the engine, or like are we going to have to do funky shit in order to be able to actually see one another's aircraft correctly?
I'd
I've got
imagine
a
not
question
at
mark there.
first.
Mm.
I'd imagine you'll get the nearest, probably the nearest aircraft that's similar, which could be, could be a Cessna 172 for all I know.
Interesting you say that. I've seen in the screenshots there was a marketplace there. I'm wondering if anything that's uploaded to the marketplace, I'm assuming there's going to be some
Yeah.
sort of approval system, but anything uploaded to the marketplace would, in theory, I would hope that they'd make it so that anything that's on the marketplace can be seen by everyone else, the model.
Sure.
Yeah, this is actually what I was sort of indicating before and was sort of hoping whether or not they have a system in place where every single aircraft that's available and approved to use in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 is actually held in one location. And if you encounter one that you don't own, much like it's streaming in terrain, it actually streams in just the external 3D model for that particular aircraft. Because
I'd
it sounds like
imagine,
that would be a nightmare. But actually look at the DCS files. Most
yeah,
DCS fighters are only about a gig each. And the majority of that is actually avionics and all the internal bullshit. The
yeah,
actual 3D model and textures isn't particularly large.
no. And I'd imagine this is going to be an option you'll be able to tick, depending obviously on your whether you're on decent internet or poverty net.
Mm. Mm.
So I'd imagine that's going to be a thing. The other thing that just struck me there was obviously um, you can only have so many aircraft, and that's related to people's ability. Obviously, bandwidth is going to be a huge issue for some people, and I think there will be options in place that will allow you to kind of select your bandwidth, and then the system will actually decide, what you're capable of showing.
Yeah, actually, I think this was sort of not directly addressed, but sort of implied in the system. The 50 aircraft you can view at once would be the upper limit, the maximum on the slider settings that you can
Yeah,
view at any given time. And if you pull the sliders back, you're going to see less. But
yeah,
what was very clear was that regardless of what the slider was set to, the simulation would always be tracking the near every single aircraft that's within 200 kilometers. So they
yeah,
would appear on radar, and then based on what your slider settings were for how many you could view, potential maximum of 50, or if say you've got it slided down so you can only see 10, the simulation would have to intelligently select which ones would be the most important to see. So which ones are the closest to you, or in the position where you're most likely going to have to deal with
yeah.
them, and then it would just ignore everything else based on your settings. Which again, that's good design, because
It's a
that
good
allows
design.
allows a wider spec selection of systems to actually be able to do it. Because I imagine there will be people. What I've seen so far is, despite everybody's fear that Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 might require a top end system, like the top video card, top graphics
Yeah,
card, 32 gig of RAM, all the bloody bullshit in the world to make it run as fast as it possibly can. I think they're actually aiming on making it at least flyable at acceptable frame rates and acceptable visuals on a common current mid spec system.
mhm.
If you
A
happen
little
to have a
birdie
top
told me.
Mhm.
A little birdie told me it's very adaptable.
Yes, that was what I've been assuming based on what I've seen so far. If you happen to have the NASA supercomputer, you're going to have everything, and it's going to be great. If you don't, well, in the end, it's sort of been implied from the word go. they are intending to make this simulation run on the next Xbox.
Yeah.
So there's your minimum system requirements.
Yeah.
It has to be able to run on the new Xbox that's coming out. I was originally sort of supposed to be the Xbox. What is it? The Xbox One Pro or something, but
Yeah.
it looks like they're now aiming at the Xbox One X. Well, there's your minimum system requirements for the game. It has to, or for the simulation, it has to be able to run on that and run acceptably too, because console gamers are not going to take a simulation that runs like shit. It's got to run well.
Just to hark back.
Sorry, just on that Xbox
Yeah.
thing. My understanding is that it's going to run on the next generation of Xbox, not the currently released one.
Yeah, which is the Xbox, well, the Xbox,
the new
X?
Xbox, the new Xbox.
The one that looks like a refrigerator if you blow it up.
Yeah. I'm not aware of when it's releasing, but the new Xbox, according to the specs that's been released, is actually going to be quite beefy. It's going to give our mid-range PCs of current mid-range PCs quite a run for their money. So don't expect the minimum system requirements to be that low. I would assume going by that.
Yeah, it would be current 2020 mid-spec system. If you've got a mid-spec system from years ago, you're probably going to be running those at minor and having the greatest of times. But
the interesting part of that is it's going to be, obviously because it's a console, it's going to be frozen at that, which means they will have to come up with kind of innovative ways of introducing new features, which will be, a major boom for everybody. Because if you're playing on a PC that you're continuously updating, it's going to be so much better.
Yeah, because anything that develops on PC does have a tendency to have a performance or hardware requirement creep. The further along it develops, it's going to be more hungry for RAM. It's going to be more hungry for a better video card, and so on and so on. If they're going to make it run on a static console that doesn't have that level of modular upgradability, well, they can't. It has to. Everything that they do, every they make, must run within the boundaries of the minimum system requirements of that system. So yeah, that helps people. It means things aren't going to go too far out of control. And as we discussed in the other side as well, the other advantage of the consoles is in terms of controllers, because we're probably going to see a lot more developers start putting a lot more time into flight sim controllers now. Once this is actually available on a console and has an active player base for it, because you need numbers if you're going to get companies to start building peripherals for you. And at the moment, the only one outside of some of the specialist boutique areas that are developing for that is Logitech. They're the only ones that actually have a flight yoke and stuff at the moment that isn't boutique, like the
Honeycomb.
What is it again? Honeycomb. Yeah, which looks amazing.
Sorry, I thought.
Yeah.
The honeycomb looks amazing. Sorry, I thought you were calling Mags honey, and I was like, maybe I should step out of the chat for a moment.
No. You can watch.
Oh, can I? Jesus.
Get your video camera ready.
Christ.
Anyway, so yeah,
as long as I get the money shot.
Just while we're talking about that, I'm not sure I'm aware of this, but Crash, what kind of controller setup have you got?
At this point, a fucking ridiculous one. I'm using obviously a HoTaS or Warthog HoTaS system. I also have an old X55 system set up because I fly the F-14 a bit in DCS. And when I'm learning, I'm still learning all the Rio functions, but it's handy to have a second stick, particularly for controlling the
Giggity.
What's it called? The the bloody the targeting pod. And I also have an A10 little UFC up front. So yeah, too much shit is the answer. But I want a honeycomb, so that's going to be my next purchase.
The honeycomb throttle quadrant is first on my list. And the flight yoke is also on my radar, just because I am planning on starting. Well, I was going to actually be starting up sooner rather than later, but now it's going to be a bit later. I was going to actually be starting back on my path towards getting my private pilot's license.
Nice. Just to hark back to a couple of things there, friend of mine, Squid, mentioned that there are a couple of runways in Europe that are also, and surrounding areas that are blocked out. There's one in Greece, and there's one somewhere else he mentioned as well. And just one, we were talking about the development earlier, like third-party development for FS 2020. I don't know what you guys think, and I'm kind of interested to hear this. But I'm kind of hoping the development system is a mixture between DCS and X-Plane, in the sense that there's gatekeeping on the mods you have to pay for, but on the free mods there's absolutely no gatekeeping. I don't. What do you guys think of that?
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yep.
Because if I want to be able to mod Flight Sim 2020 to change all of the 747s into flying gigantic phallus objects, I want to be able to do that.
Yeah. Totally.
Okay, I want to go to. I wouldn't go quite that far, although that does sound funny as fuck. So it's a video out of that. Let's be honest. You were thinking that as well.
Yes.
What I was actually thinking more of is for aircraft, I would like to see a bit of gatekeeping on there, because there are some truly shit aircraft that I've seen made for general flight simming, and I'm sure anybody who's spent any time in general flight simming
Yeah.
has seen them. How we've seen it in DCS, and there is gatekeeping there. I'm sure. Remember the Hawk and the P40 under development and a few other things. Let's they who shall not be named.
The shite Hawk.
Yes, we've seen some of that happen as well. That happens. So I would like to definitely see control into regards to the aircraft, because obviously people spend. I can't vouch for everybody, of course, but I am completely comfortable with my experience in flight simming, parting with over $100 for an aircraft, and I won't think about it if it's an aircraft that I want. But I do sort of expect that aircraft is going to be of a particular quality.
Yes.
So I don't have a problem with that, but I expect a bit of gatekeeping to make sure it's at that quality.
Yeah.
That said, on the terrain side of things, I'm hoping that is very open, because what I would like to see is enough flexibility on the terrain for people that live in parts all around the world to be able to start going through and essentially even having tools available for them to do this, but start modeling sections of their towns or sections of their local airfield, sections around them, making small changes to make it line up, and then being able to petition it forward and say, look, this is what this area actually looks like. Here it is. I've done it for free. Can you put this in? And then obviously you'd have a tick box in the game if you wanted that, and have that just roll in.
Yeah.
I would quite happily build my town. I'd never be able to put my name on it because I don't live, but I would quite happily go through, photograph, and remodel over the course of a couple of months my entire town down to the paint on the walls, just to make it represented properly in a flight sim, simply for the fact that I have never seen this town correctly modeled in a flight sim. In fact, like, this is a town, I live in a town of let's just say between 500 5,000 people. That gives it a wide enough area. The last time I flew over it in X-Plane, and I've flown over it in Flight Simulator 10 as well, there's about six houses and a barn here. There's nothing. The entire town just functionally doesn't exist within flight simulation for the most part. So I would quite happily make sure it was there. I know it will, with the way that Flight Simulator 2020 is doing it using the satellite data. The town will exist. I would quite happily go through and make sure it existed properly, just because it never has.
Yeah.
So
and I'm sure I'm not alone at that.
Even on my level, like my town, well, small city of 30,000 plus. So it's more than 30,000. I'm not going to say how many, because once again, I don't want people to know where I live, even though it's less of a concern for me. It's still there's no one that's gotten it right. There's missing features. There's specific monuments that definitely could be seen from the air, and there's particular features which I've had Laobi check and explain for me, and it's yeah, it's just because I don't have the default scenery for my local area. Because the first thing I did when I downloaded it, Explain, was actually to download the high detailed ortho for my area and do all the updates and whatnot. So I wanted to know what it looks like for Laobi, who hasn't got that stuff. But yeah, they haven't got that right. There's yeah, there's just certain little landmark areas where I wish they'd got better resolution.
Yeah. And even third-party terrain developers are never going to be able to get all of this perfect because they can't be everywhere and they can't see everything.
No.
Yeah, so having it open source development map side, especially since they're trying to be the simulation that you can fly full VFR.
Yeah.
This is very important because if they have it open, so they essentially open source from areas, there might be some areas that never get fixed because nobody happens to really live in those areas. But if you have it mostly open source, and the option to flick it in, there's all the downside to consider is there is always going to be that one dickhead who's going to put a giant cock in the middle of whatever town just because they can. So there does need to be some kind of yeah, it was dead meat. At the same time,
I can't
there will
confirm
be
or
people
deny
that
such
will
rumors.
try and model the towns correctly because they would like to fly VFR over them and they would like other people that come into the area to have the accurate experience. So I'm sort of hoping they do something open there.
To quote, so I can't remember who said it first, I didn't, but to quote somebody, it's harnessing the community's autism.
Yes, that's exactly it. And there are, as I said, we're in a community of counters, people that will actually flip their shit if they count the side model of the X aircraft and the number of rivets do not correspond to the correct rivet and the rivet count on the aircraft. There are people that will put in complaints about that in this community. Unleash them on the terrain.
Yeah.
It'll only get better.
That's it.
Because they are that autistic about it, they won't be able to fuck it up. It'll drive them nuts if they do. So do it, and everybody wins. They're happy, we're happy, everybody gets a better experience. There will have to be some kind of, obviously, system of recording, just in case somebody decides to do something stupid. But yeah, I'm really hoping they do go that path, because I think we'll get take what is already looking to be an incredible looking simulation and take it even further again, and do it potentially at a point where, and this is always the catch because obviously money does change hands, but at the moment to try and make a flight simulator look incredibly beautiful is incredibly expensive. I'd like to see that end. I'd like to see money spent on buying planes, not on buying airport terrain packs in order to make the runway not look shit.
Yeah.
That's what I would like to see.
Yeah.
Having said that, I wouldn't mind having sort of, in quotes, high definition packs available for airports, but still having a base level of the airport being very recognizable, perfectly recognizable. Like you go, yes, okay, this is the airport. Like,
yeah, for certain airports, yeah. For
like the case now. Sorry, sudden onset of SARS there.
having said all that, I probably want to start winding this up because we've been going for nearly 2 hours now.
Questions. Yeah, we're going to be doing some questions at the end here. Yep. Was there anything in particular you spotted that you wanted to go through?
So I'll just go through the chat and I'll put the questions out. So,
hey Joey, by the way, just saw him there in the chat.
Okay, so what do we got? There was a few how are yous for everyone. I'm fantastic.
Yeah, still alive.
I'm super.
Yeah.
Radio. There was some questions about the IL-2 stuff. So I'll just cover that quickly. So if you've got IL2 through Steam, and you want to take advantage of the promos, if you go to the IL2 website and go to the login page, there is actually a login with your Steam account button on the login screen. So you can have a look at that. So Kylux mentioned that live traffic for X-Plane works quite well, and it uses the X-Plane AI models.
Yep. Also, quickly just popping out a thank you to Pokemon 3020 and Tigermoto for the Twitch subscriptions.
Yep. To the Bizno, I'm assuming you're meaning Mags, but no, none of the people here on this podcast are related to the A10C cockpit project.
No, we actually have sex with our wives.
All right, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. No. I as a creator, I generally try and stay away from anything except some of the restricted early testing on models, and that's usually a bit of promotional purposes and a bit of just trying to help out with the final details towards the end. It's best to not be involved for exactly the same reason that these two are having issues talking about certain things. I've discovered on my end that anything that involves an NDA or any development or any information that you don't want everything out into the public eye, it is best if you do content creation not to be a part of it, because you will inadvertently let something slip that you do not want to let slip, and otherwise you've got to be on yourself all the time not to do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you've got to remember what you can and can't say.
Yes,
what you saw
that's
publicly and what you saw privately.
So
yeah. You
It's
need
like banging a
notebook.
politician.
I'm just going to wash that mental image out of my brain for a second.
Which
and
one would
just
you bang?
there's one last question in the chat.
Yes.
There's from the Steer. He says, guys, what would you think about an A129 CBT Mangusta 5-blade rotor and a blah, 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 in DCS? It goes on listing things about it, but he mentions one particular word that triggers me, and that's helicopter. And helicopters can go die in a fire.
All right. Dead Meat hates rotary wing. I love helicopters. I think he's got some problems with him.
I'm afraid of helicopters, but I'm open. I'm not a stranger to taking my chopper out in public, so I'd be very happy with it.
Yeah, I bring it on. I want to see all sorts of wicked fun shit pop up in DCS. There's actually I want to see Korean. I would love to at some point see a proper Korean Korea map and a proper Vietnam map for Korean War in Vietnam. Obviously, we're going to have aircraft going into that spots. I would also like to see area helicopters, including things like the Flying Banana. I can't remember the model for that one. Yeah, just some of those early helicopters where they weren't even using turbine engines. They were fucking diesels.
Yeah.
They were piston diesel helicopters. They were death traps.
Ones.
Yeah, or radial. Yeah, the fucking engine of a P-47 just mounted pointing up. I would love to see some of that stuff modeled as well. Obviously, my helicopter listing is fairly detailed here. Obviously, I've got my Huey already, which is my favorite helicopter, so I'm already good. But I want a Cobra. Doesn't have to necessarily be a Zulu, but I want a Cobra because obviously Huey and Cobra are underneath the same helicopter, particularly the Vietnam model ones. It's just what's bolted on the outside that's different. It's the same engine, same subframe, same control sets. That's what Bell designed. So I want the Cobra because it's always been my attack helicopter. I would love an early version of the Apache if we can get it. I don't think we ever. Well, no, actually, no. I can't say that now because I would have said that about the Typhoon, and yet we're getting one. So maybe that's a possibility, but I would like to see a Chinook.
Oh, that's now you're talking dirty.
Yeah,
That's been my aim for a long time.
the one thing I would actually like with DCS, and it goes into helicopters, and I would like to see it in the fixed wing department as well. I want to see them do an update where they start working on logistics gameplay, and I want them, and this is part of the reason why I'm sort of hoping we'll start seeing more civilian flight sims or non-combat flight sim developers start looking at DCS as a platform.
Yeah.
I am hoping we start seeing some heavies. I want a C-130 and I want a Chinook, and I want a series of gameplay updates that allow for logistical based gameplay. I want to fly a C-130 under fire cover, fighter cover, under behind enemy lines and drop troops off, or I want to fly into the friggin' mountains of Iran, Persian
Okay.
Gulf map, and turn off my rear rotor while my front one is running to keep my wheels off the ground and drop troops out the back.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's wind this up now, and we'll just go with the shilling your wares. So Crash, where can we find you? Give us all the usual marketing
Well,
spiel.
you can find me on YouTube. I am actually, because I'm a whore, I am actually selling T-shirts, but I'm not promoting them in any way, apart from just now. But plus the fact they're absolutely shite, I wouldn't buy them. You can find me on YouTube. Just look for Laobi on YouTube, and yeah, basically, I might consider actually doing some Twitch in the near future because I will be playing some. I keep saying this, but I am getting into playing kind of a lot of other games, so I will be doing other things apart from flight simulation. I've been getting into a lot of U-boat recently, and I don't know if you
Yeah.
guys have seen one called Wolfpack.
Yes, I have, and I've
It
been wondering how long it would take me to see. Dead Meat doesn't like submarines either.
Why do you not like submarines? Is it because they're long, hard,
And full of semen,
I like how
yes.
you just cut off.
Yes. So okay, so Mags, yeah, shill your shit.
Yeah. Well, you know where to find me on YouTube, and you know where obviously Twitch. Hard to find. I
You're
do
cutting out
have
badly
my
there.
for God's sakes, yeah. I'm looking at my internet at the moment, and Discord's sitting there cracking the shits with me, so that's local. Obviously, find me here on Twitch. You know where I am on YouTube, the obnoxious Australian who can't land a fucking plane to save himself. Videos are running a little bit slow at this point in time because of this net issue, although I'm hoping I'll have the podcast repeated onto YouTube relatively quickly for you guys to check out. And for anybody who's missed any of this to be able to watch from start to finish. For shilling my stuff at the moment, obviously I am on Patreon, although to be perfectly honest, I don't really encourage anybody to sign up there unless you sort of have already, and unless you really like doing that kind of thing. I would really rather anybody who would like to help support the channel out, either Twitch Prime with your free Twitch Prime here on Twitch, or jump over to my Teespring store and have a look at a couple of the designs there. I'm actually doing, and it's going to be interesting how I actually finish this off, my last year of a graphic design degree at the moment, and I have been in t-shirt design for about 6 months doing aviation-based stuff, and I'm going to be going into general gaming very soon. I have a couple of designs up. Also, going to do some cars and just other stuff as well. Just really cool t-shirt designs is what I'm sort of working on. And obviously piss taking with a couple of meme shirts in there as well, including my recent one, Bog Roll Zombies, which is very much related to the current malware that is going around, the human malware and the stupidity involved with it. So I would, if anybody wants to support me, honestly, grab a shirt, because then you've got a cool shirt, and I really like the fact that people have my stuff out in the real world and something that isn't digital. I'm really happy with that. So yeah, okay, that's
Okay.
about everything. Yeah.
No, I'm gonna show my stuff. So
All right, do your thing.
on my part, I run the Unprofessionals server, which obviously is associated with the Unprofessionals podcast and MagzTV official server. So you can find us on Discord. So I believe there's actually a search function now to find the Unprofessionals. So I run an IL2 server and 2 DCS servers. There's also a Minecraft server as well, but I don't believe anyone even logs into that, so it's not hugely worth mentioning. And yeah, you can find me on the MagzTV Discord, which is linked on the stream here, or on the channel here, and also you can find me on the Unprofessionals Discord server, as well as occasionally see me popping up on the DCS and IL2 servers. Right.
Mhm.
So thanks everyone
Right.
for watching.
Yep. Don't forget to tell Laobi to go fuck himself, and
And don't forget
And
to hit
wash
the
your hands, folks.
Yeah.
Particularly if you plan on touching my dick.
And don't forget
Yes.
to tick the dislike comment on all of Laobi's videos just for that comment alone.
Please do. Yeah.
Right.
All right, guys. Catch yous later, and yeah, be safe out there in all seriousness, because yeah, it's all fucked at the moment.
Yeah.
Catch yous.
Bye bye.